Per usual, living on this channel is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. It is Setup Sunday / Macro Monday, a bit of a mashup today. Will be another mashup on next week's set of videos. Starting with the flows for last week, we did have over 100 million in inflows, most of that again coming in to BTC. This was a global effort, so that's good. Never like to see concentration in any regard. And we also had a little bit into Solana. What's interesting to me on this flows list, if we look at the year to date, ETH versus Solana flows really says a lot. Solana versus multi-asset flows really says a lot. Obviously, Bitcoin is, several multiples, 10x above everything, and then some. And I think a lot of people are still laser focused on, oh, we know we're going to get the Bitcoin ETF, so now we're focused on this other stuff. I think this other stuff, as in other ETFs, is going to be a long haul down the road. BlackRock applied for a spot ETH ETF, so that one will likely get approved eventually. But the way ETH's been moving price-wise, I just don't see any rush for some massive rotation there. Clearly the market doesn't either. And to me, it's a lot of hopium from people expecting, oh, we're going to get XYZ ETF. The SEC still thinks Solana is a security. I mean, I'm not going to disagree. They can't even say that ETH is a commodity. I'm not going to disagree. So I just think it's going to be a long haul. I wouldn't be focused on that. I wouldn't say to myself, oh man, ETH is going to get blah, blah, blah. That's why I need this. Or Solana's going to get blah, blah, blah. Let's be honest here. All of this stuff on the alt side lately has been just pure speculation, kind of on nothing. And on the BTC side, it's certainly been speculation on the ETF. As far as GBTC, I think this trade is just about done. At least for me, it's just about done. I'll be excited to put this chapter behind us forever, permanently. Be excited to never look at this discount premium chart ever again. It's through the weekly cloud here, so the TA says it's done. Can this go to 45? Sure. Maybe on the ETF announcement day. But the fees relative to the upside here just don't make sense. If they don't get approved on ETF day, you may see a negative reaction or a lagging reaction relative to the spot side. So there's a lot of variables, a lot of news variables here that I just think are unnecessary relative to just being in a spot product or being in a non-GBTC BTC equivalent, right? And as far as the discount, again, that trade is pretty much done. We can look to ETHE. This has some upside potential. If we look at ETH spot, again, not really moving, right? Everybody knows that at this point. Yes, there's some upside here. Yes, there's a discount around 11%. This Bitcoin discount's around 5-6% now. And is that really enough? The question you got to ask yourself, again, from a relative value perspective, is it worth sitting in this versus trading BTC or a BTC equivalent product relative to that ETF? I think it's getting harder and harder to justify sitting in this ETH product. There's been a lot of little ETF news that I could really care less about at this point. Let's just get it over with. Okay, I don't need to hear about some amendment every other day from everybody. It's a good sign, don't get me wrong. I'm happy about it, but it's just like, okay, let's get the show on the road here. There was a headline. This is probably from Charles Gasparino, if I had to guess. I think that's the guy at Fox, the journalist. So take this with a grain of salt, but this was supposedly what the SEC had said regarding the remaining issuers. They have to get everything in by the end of the year if they want to be considered in the first wave. BlackRock has done so. A few others have done so. My read on this additional compliance requirements is, instead of the SEC coming out and having a meeting and saying, okay, you guys need to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, then we'll get this approved. Instead, they're going through back and forth. So to me, it sounds like they're trying to, cull the herd a little bit by seeing who wants it the most and just making them jump through hoops. They don't want in-kind, fine. They want AP, fine, whatever, blah, 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 right? It's never ending. I'm just done with it. As far as back to the GBTC stuff, I had this headline today that Barry resigned as Grayscale chairman. I take that as a super bullish sign for a GBTC conversion. GBTC, Barry, DCG, all of it's been under tons of scrutiny regarding what they did in the drawdown there with GBTC, the backroom, smoke-filled deals between them and Genesis and Three Arrows Capital. So enough's enough. Time for some consequences, and that's what we're seeing. And I think this helps, this aids the GBTC conversion, and it may even part of some deal that said, you know, you need to do this or you're not going to get converted. So I wouldn't read this as a bearish event at all. Balchunas agreed with me at Bloomberg, the ETF analyst, and like he says here, possibly part of some deal for the conversion process. There's also questions around, you know, we have a news catalyst, and then we have the waiting game. When does this launch? And then we have more waiting games as far as when do the flows come in. That's all that stuff is secondary to actually getting the ETF, but that's going to be the next question. And again, Balchunas is saying maybe 45 days, but probably much sooner than that, probably maybe as early as mid-January. And what I keep seeing on all these charts, alts included, is, you know, even legacy included, we've been running so hot for so long that the probability of continuation without a pullback declines. The likelihood of individuals waiting to enter for a pullback increases, right? So that may limit our upside, regardless of the ETF, regardless of what flows are going to look like, et cetera, right? You can, again, there's 20 different things you can say. What level of plus minus are we going to get on that day, in January, in the month, in the quarter, on and on and on and on. All important data points, but I think it's hard to game that all out and know with some degree of certainty. There's also GOX repayments that are starting, and there's a ton of people who have no clue what they're talking about here. Okay. Some of these repayments that have actually been sent are in JPY through PayPal. Bit of an odd choice, but that's what they did. The BTC so far has not moved. I'm expecting a bearish market reaction when that happens, because it's happened the past 16 times there's been any news regarding this. And you can track that. You can follow that with a Twitter bot. You can track all the addresses individually yourself, but this bot sends out a tweet, I think it's every 6 hours, and just verifies, you know, no BTC have been moved. You won't need to ask whether or not it's been moved. There will be a market reaction. There always has been. So expect that. And if we're lucky, it's going to be around January. You know, let's just get all this out on the table, get it all over with. That way we can stop thinking about it and worrying about it. Definitely my preferred outcome for all this stuff. As far as Bitcoin on the TA side, historically in the pre-halving year, we have never exceeded the 618, the fib of the bear market that is currently at 48.5-ish. There's also a volume node at around 47.5. If we exceed this level, it would be the first time. It would take an extraordinary news catalyst for that to happen, ETF being one such catalyst. So again, we have 20 different things to game out here. If you as an individual are willing or wanting to do that, you can. I don't know how much that's going to help. On the day, here's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting a generally bullish market reaction to somewhere probably between 48 and 50. If we get over 50, I think that would be unlikely, but this isn't a game of am I right, am I wrong? This is just a game of probabilities, right? Candle-wise up here, we look okay. We've consolidated. This isn't frankly bearish. It's not exactly turbo bullish either, but it's not screaming breakdown. You could read this as some sort of flag attempt up here. We're through the weekly cloud. So again, the cloud is already telling you this move is done, not to re-enter, not to do anything. The next step on the cloud would be waiting for the bullish cloud, and that is a ways out yet. So what makes the most sense to me is a market reaction based on the news to somewhere in the 48 range, and then we start to get angry throughout the month of January for various reasons. I don't know, right? I'm just making stuff up here, but TA-wise, I do expect us to come back to this zone, which is a mix of the pitchfork midline, the cloud, weekly Kijun, and the 20-week moving average. So the last thing you want to do is get liquidated pre-halving, pre-ETF inflows, okay? So don't do anything beyond repair. Don't set yourself up for failure here. If, for instance, we're red on the news catalyst day and you're wondering what happened, I was told this is super bullish. Well, sure, but we're already up X%. They told me it wouldn't be buy the rumor, sell the news. Sure, over time it might not be, but on the day, very much could be, right? So I think you have to be open to that possibility. I think 57.60 is maximum on the day, right? That would be an insane move on the day. I don't know what that percentage would be. There may be some selling in early January relative to deferring taxes essentially for another tax cycle. You know, there's all sorts of variables here. I do think an upside move is fairly certain, but also fairly limited. So, you have to trade that accordingly. On the daily, we're still holding above the Tenkin, the blue line here. No real risk of a TKC clamp at this point, but the Kijun is approaching the Tenkin, red and blue line here. And if we get a daily bearish TK cross, that would be an exit signal for the long side. Now, to muddy the waters even further, right, we could get a bearish TK cross before the ETF approvals. And then that's another question as a trader. What do you do? Do you throw the system away knowing that there's a news catalyst pending, or do you trade that accordingly? On the day of the news, I'm not expecting anything to be quote unquote working, so I wouldn't expect that you're going to necessarily be able to log into any exchange. All the DEXs are going to be crazy and fees are going to be insane, right? So you kind of have to prepare a little bit ahead of time in that regard. Something down the road into January, we may see, if this is the interim top, is an edge-to-edge move in the bearish direction from, let's say, 40 to 35, right? We're talking weeks and weeks away from that, but that's something to watch for if we do not make a higher high. Way too early to call that, just thinking about that. On the 8-hour, we've held nicely above the cloud since the breakout the entire time. So again, if we start to lose the 8-hour cloud, if we start to drift into the cloud, close into the 8-hour cloud, that is a warning sign for the long side, as is a bearish TK cross. That would be another warning sign for the long side. Now, this could morph into some sort of ascending triangle flag, right? There's all sorts of possibilities here, but again, the probabilities and the likelihood of that declines if we start to swim inside of that 8-hour cloud. Let's bounce around a little bit to miners. If you have questions about mining data of the companies, I'm not that person. There's a website dedicated to that, right? Dig into that deeply at your leisure. But as far as mining stocks, mining equities are concerned, broadly, they should do better if Bitcoin does better. Broadly, they should do better if Bitcoin mining profitability increases. You can also look at that on this metric. And that's exactly what we've seen, right? Bitcoin prices have gone up, miners have gone up. Profitability for miners has gone up. Equities for miners have gone up. Really what I care about, I don't really care about the Bitcoin side. How much money are they bringing in? Are they bringing in a record amount of money, which has been the case? Then they will probably do well once Wall Street wakes up to the fact that transaction fees are important, other than halving. Something to watch for post-halving. If the ordinal stuff dies down, if the fees die down, if price is sideways, miners probably do not as well, broadly, right? Again, there's a lot of game theory stuff to think about here. If there's mining consolidation in the company side, miners may do better. The bigger miners probably do the best. The miners with the Bitcoin treasuries probably do the best. All things to think about. So, why is XYZ miner outperforming another miner? Well, it could just be they have a bigger Bitcoin treasury, Bitcoin is bullish, and they have more hash rate. Talk about Marathon versus something else down the list. Why is Stronghold outperforming today or last week? Well, it kind of languished and did a bunch of nothing. They had some positive news and it went up, right? So that's some non-TA stuff to watch for. And then if you want to drill down as deep as you can, why are the miners making money? Well, because of this ordinal stuff, and we can watch that play out. It has calmed down on the fee side quite a bit, calmed down on the issuance of the inscriptions or creation mints of the inscriptions a little bit. But that's something to watch for into next year. Again, in and around halving, pre-halving, post-halving, in and around the ETF. There's some drama around forking the chain in and around the ETF. Sure, whatever, right? Like, bring it on. Just bring it all on. Gox coins, GBTC, unlock, right? Some sort of fork around the ETF announcement, whatever. Just get it all out of your system and we can go on our merry way the next 4 years, as we always have. As far as TA on the miners, WGMI is the basket ETF. This chart is back to its yearly highs, back to, 150%, whatever this is, year to date. Looks excellent on the cloud, definitely overbought. The broad pattern here would be a mega inverted head and shoulders, and you can kind of see that on Marathon, right? Marathon is in the weekly cloud. It's hitting its inverted head and shoulders target. This looks very good for eventual continuation. This could easily, right, retrace to the breakout point and then have a slow ascent to 43. It's just tough because it's hitting its early targets. It's gone literally straight up. And yes, there's some upside here, right? Do I like this over ETHE? Do I like this over GBTC? I do. So it's a relative value question. Massive volume coming in here last week. So again, that just comes down to your individual preferences, your time preferences, how much volatility and chop you want to eat, but this still looks good for 2024. The other miners also look decent for a move in 2024. RIOT maybe to 25, still in the weekly cloud there. CleanSpark kind of already hitting its targets in the weekly. I know this cloud is the Bitcoin cloud, not the legacy cloud, but it's close enough. Point is, some of these are almost there, some of them aren't, right? Some of them have a higher place to go, and it's just a relative value question. And you're kind of watching the company fundamentals a little bit, watching ordinals a little bit. All that's going to influence the prices in 2024. Let's switch gears to alts. This is TOTAL3 with the cloud removing stablecoins. We have seen some stablecoin issuance over the past week. TOTAL3 in the cloud here on the weekly, so that looks good. There's no guarantee that this teleports to 600 billion or whatever that is, but it suggests we are seeing a liftoff, right? Obviously, as we are on TOTAL3. This could retrace to 290, this could retrace to 300, 250, right? All that's fair game. Still very much possible, but broadly, TOTAL3 looks very good. The best it's looked, you'd have to go back probably 2021 or earlier as far as the cycle move higher. Alts tend to do best post-halving. The USDT versus USDC battle rages on. There was some smaller issuance on USDC as well, but in general, it's been kind of flat here over the past couple weeks for both of these, which makes me all the more maybe concerned about these altcoin rallies. Where's that money really coming from? Is it coming into the ecosystem in some other fashion that I'm just not monitoring, which is completely possible. But if it's barely coming through institutional inflows and it's barely coming in through stables, it's got to be coming in through fiat on-ramps in some other fashion, right? TOTAL3 relative to BTC also looks very bullish. In 2019 and 2020, we had this broadening ascending wedge thing that ended up breaking down. This to me looks like it has bottomed for the moment. This is removing ETH, and that's key because ETH BTC does not look like it's bottomed, but even against BTC, alts look okay-ish here. You just have to be careful. You have to dodge the bullishness of the inflows for BTC. You have to dodge the news catalyst if you're an altcoin maxi. Now, the alts are unlikely to go in the opposite direction of BTC, but just something to think about and be aware of. Nothing new to say for ETH, just still in the weekly cloud, still like that 3K target eventually, maybe in 2029 at this point, I don't know. But this looks okay. Ultimately, I'm really not worried about ETH until it's sub 1600, if that even happens. It's just going to take some time for the selling overhang of all these bankrupt companies to work its way through the system. And it's giving the other coins a chance to get ahead. ETH's fees are very high relative to these other coins. Everybody knows that. ETH has a ton of layer 2s that people would rather transact on. So ETH has all sorts of problems. Those problems tend to go away if price goes up. So it's just harder for price to go up with those problems intact, right? So ETH still languishing there. ETH BTC continues to look bearish to me, continues to lean bearish. It's risking a multi-year support. There's nothing bullish about this chart. It doesn't look bearish enough to buy. I still see a ton of hopium on this chart. These people may be right. I doubt it, but they may be right. We might bounce at 05, great psychological level. The TA would disagree with that in the moment, but if we get back into this weekly cloud, sure. If we get back above the weekly cloud, then I can give bullish ETH BTC. But until then, for me, this is just a massive avoid. No bull div again here yet on RSI. We've really yet to make a lower low on a close, which is what the RSI is measured by. Ultimately, in 2024, I expect this to dig pretty deeply, and the pitchfork would support that. We really don't bottom on hope, right? We bottom on fear, capitulation, that sort of thing. So I don't think we're quite there yet. We're getting there. Don't get me wrong. We are getting there, but not quite there yet. Solana, this is the linear chart, weekly edge to edge on a cloud. It's done really well. Obviously, it's up, 1,500% on the year or something ridiculous. At least it was. The weekly candle at this point, I know we have 5 days left to close, but the weekly candle would be an inverted dragonfly. Certainly not a happy candle. I personally would love it for ETH to just wash everybody out, go back to like 40 or something like that. But again, here for ETH, if you're still sitting in ETH, what is your upside? If you think I'm dumb and, ETH or Solana is going to take over the world, then my opinion, is irrelevant, but the technicals, when we're in the cloud, mean anything is possible here. I'm not looking to scare anybody out of a position, but to me, it looks like this move, for the most part, has happened, and the meat of the move is pretty much done. The next step, again, would be back above the cloud, bullish cloud, and that is probably 6 months away at this point. That doesn't mean Solana can't hit a cycle high of 1,000, right? Another 10x from here, but in the moment, it certainly looks like we've reached a logical potential top. On the daily cloud, we've got a Kijun support at around 79, little mini TKC clamp here. This nice pitchfork points to a midline also in the wheelhouse of 79-ish. We hit the yearly pivot as well. So everything to me says we're going to need to reconsolidate here before we attempt to move higher. We're also getting to the top of that pitchfork. At least we did at the time. AVAX is another one. You know, if Solana actually has activity in projects, sure. Does AVAX? I don't know. Does DOT? I don't know. Does any of the other chains? I don't know, right? And it's harder to maintain that greed and speculation and inflows when there's not much there, right? The speculation will get you so far, it will catapult you like it has, but it's hard to maintain that, right? Look at ETH, look at ICOs on ETH, look at DeFi on ETH, DeFi summer I'm talking about, look at NFTs, right? So until we get that new narrative for inflows, maybe for NFTs on Solana or gaming on AVAX or whatever it is, I just don't think we're there yet. That's not technical analysis, that's fundamental analysis, but I'm just saying, like, look, there's not much going on, let's be honest, right? AVAX has had some issues with fees here as well. And on the TA side, it's hit the yearly pivot. It's hit the measured move of, if we want to call this a falling wedge, it has a bear div up here. It got pretty close to hitting the breakdown point around 50 psychological level. So to me, there's plenty of reasons why, again, this likely consolidates or needs to consolidate before moving higher. And if you've been in from around 10-ish, right, that's already a 5x. Much like the bonk question, right? Like, you already have 1,000x. How much more do you want? You know, like, yes, it can keep going. Nothing says this can't go to 1 million. I don't care, but it's just a probability game at this point with a lot of this stuff. I would feel better at 30. I'd feel better with some sort of supporting chart pattern, some sort of consolidation, right? Most of these charts have ran hot for a long time. Hot and heavy, baby. So collectively, I do think probably going to slow down here until the ETF news catalyst. Let's do some quick legacy charts here towards the back end. Inflation is coming down, has continued to come down. We are below last month's CPI, which is good. We're not quite to that 2% target. And you'll hear a lot of people saying, look, we're going to go, you know, we're going to double dip inflation again. We're going to go back to 5+%. We don't see it yet. This doesn't look very threatening to me. This looks like we're almost to that target, but we're not quite there yet. So until this starts to perk up in a violent way, then I can get bearish and expect Fed hikes again, but I don't quite see that yet here. If we look at the month over month increase here on CPI, right, that's good. This is going to get reported mid-January. Something else to watch out for on the crypto side is if Legacy rolls over. Legacy's been very generous so far. We're going on 9 straight weeks of green, but if Legacy gets wind of what CPI will be, or this gets priced in, which somehow never happens, but you know, we're going to get a higher print next month, most likely. Does Legacy sell off? Does that create a sell-off on the crypto side? Does that correlate with the ETF announcement, right? Lots of ifs, lots of fun stuff coming up. Across the pond, though, they've actually brought this down quite a bit pretty quickly. So bravo to them, because they were, you know, at an outrageous level at the beginning of the year. Quite the year-to-date decline here. And you got to wonder if there's a recession risk, you know, just broadly. Clearly there is already, but broadly in the UK and Europe and elsewhere on that side of the world. As far as Fed probabilities, there's a lot of cuts priced in still, which is fine. It's important to know the market here has been wrong continuously throughout history. So we're probably not going to see 6 cuts, which means we're either going to see less cuts or more cuts, right? Not necessarily less cuts. So just keep that in mind too. Anyway, this is, you know, should be bullish for everything, not because we're cutting for recessionary concerns, but because we're cutting because we don't want to be as restrictive because inflation is coming back down closer to the targets. GDP also printing above 2% still on the estimate. I don't think a recent estimate was released. Yeah, so December 22nd. So this looks good. So the recession doomers can take a back seat for now because we look okay. We also have around 800 billion left in reverse repo. This has acted as a liquidity driver for markets. Clearly seeing that on the legacy side, on the crypto side. And if we look at the inverse of reverse repo relative to SPX, relative to BTC, pretty positive correlation here. So if there's still a reverse repo to drain throughout 2024, which there will be, that's bullish. If it's still draining, that's bullish. If it's getting close to zero, not so bullish. If we pull back on issuing debt, which is unlikely, but that would also be likely bullish. Just some more fun stuff to watch for in 2024. It is a pre-election year, or actually it's an election year, right? So historically, we're likely to see more spending, whether you're bribing votes in the corporate side or retail side or Wall Street, whatever, right? There's historically been more spending in election years. Something else to watch out for is unemployment and the yield curve. Yield curve still inverted. Unemployment is still low until we're uninverted and employment starts rising. For me, it's hard to be bearish until that happens. So we can say a recession's coming, which I think it is, but that also doesn't mean we can't keep partying on here for a good long while in an election year. DXY on TA has looked increasingly bearish, just as we've had, 8 or 9 straight weeks of bullishness on equities. We've had 8 or 9 straight bearish weeks on DXY. No surprise there. Post-halving, we have historically seen drops in the DXY to the tune of 100 to 90. If we see that again, I expect the same result, which is a mega bullish crypto picture. So very important to watch that throughout 2024 and even to 2025. That will act as a tailwind for us on the crypto side. S&P, it's at an all-time high. It looks great. Is it overbought? Sure. Are we running hot? Sure. Right. This is all the crypto problem all over again. We still look pretty good. We still look like we want to test the all-time high, but how much more are we really going to get, right? I think throughout the year, this 5,600 target plus, what's my year-end target? We'll say 5,800. That's my year-end target. So overall on the weekly, with the chart pattern, with the pivots, with the cloud, we look very bullish on the S&P. Even if you drill down to the daily, yes, there's a TKC clamp here. Yes, we're overbought. Yes, people are screaming about RSI. And we had one day of down. Congratulations. Right? Until we see some actual declines here, the market is eager and willing and ready to retest that all-time high by the looks of it. Will that result in a bearish divergence on RSI? Almost definitely. So that could be enough to finally get a nice reset broadly, but we still look okay overall. Q's very much the same. Overbought, very excited, very excitable, and look ready for all-time highs. And that certainly helped us on the crypto side. Lastly, let me just talk about coin. Coin, again, much like Mara, right? It painted a very bullish reversal pattern. It painted a weekly edge to edge to the cloud. Collectively, all of that is almost finished. Now, that isn't to say that the trade is finished. This is just a probability thing. Where are we at in the cycle? We're pre-cycle, right? Historically, assuming this is bullish. Assuming Coinbase gets all the ETF custodian chips. Assuming revenue for Coinbase through the layer 2 comes back. Assuming they continue to dominate globally, right? Assuming the business continues to make money in an increasing fashion, this chart should continue to look bullish. The TA side says we're going to need 6 months somewhere around post-halving to finally make it through this weekly cloud, most likely, but we still look very bullish across the board on the coin chart. So 2024 should be very interesting. It's going to start with a bang. It's going to start with people positioning around news catalysts who haven't already. It's going to see a bunch of tax stuff happening. And legacy continues to look bullish with liquidity left to drain in the RRP. So look, I am bullish. I remain bullish through first half of the year, post-halving. Bearish on the DXY, bullish on government spending, which should increase. So it should be a fun year. Tomorrow I'll talk about alts. So we'll dig further in those predictions in that video. That's all for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.